Rise and Grind by Daymond John, one of the investors from Shark Tank. He takes us behind the scenes after all he has done for the world of how he powers through his days. What gets him up and working every morning, how things were for him when he was just starting out versus how they are now. He shows us how he's changed his approach as he has learned to wake up and work, is what I like to call it. I don't like to call it rising and grinding to be 1,000 with you guys because honestly, 100 isn't really enough for me. At least as a consumer, I just don't resonate much with the title. Yes, it's got a ring to it, but literally, for me, the word work is enough. You don't need to make a catchy name for it. Your body is always working, even when you sleep. But unscientifically speaking, I guess waking up and working is what I'd call it. He also has interviews about morning habits and just kind of daily habits with some of the most successful people who really inspire him. To me, they're kind of just people. You know, they're very inspiring, but just one of them is like a hero of mine, who in a recent interview said that to be successful, we are studying the wrong people. Like, don't learn from millionaires. He said, don't learn from me, or really anybody else who's interviewed in this book. Learn from Jeff Bezos. Learn from the boys at Google. Learn from Mark Zuckerberg. What are they doing? The interview with this guy from the book, if you don't know my channel, well, welcome to my channel. But if you do know my channel, you could probably guess who he is at this point. That interview, which I'll get to, is probably why I think this book was more than worth getting. But that's just me. Daymond John has Sway Calloway, host of the ridiculously successful hip-hop radio show, Sway in the Morning. He has him read this book for the audio version, and he begins by smashing that like button if you haven't already. It helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm. It helps so much with like video ranking and all sorts of other stuff, and I really appreciate that. And then he talks about how time and attention are super valuable and how he really appreciates that we are giving him hours, and goes on to talk about how all the most successful people he has ever met, the biggest thing that they all have in common really seems to be kind of just a killer work ethic. So whether you're a company owner or an employee or an investor like the author, or anything, whether you have 1 or 100 people under you, or 1,000, he wrote you this book. There are 15 interviews throughout the book, a few of which are with more than one person. For this review, kind of like how I did in my review of 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari, I'll drop a link to that in the description. I'm gonna kind of summarize who each person was that was interviewed, and I'm gonna say something I learned or found interesting about each interview. And obviously the book as a whole, because I mean, this is a review. I don't know why I would not actually do the review of the book. I'm kind of just like taking the little parts of the book and reviewing those, and then reviewing the whole of the sum of the parts of the, whatever that saying is. Because they really do all have something I feel like we can learn. And these are mine, you know, it's kind of like my filter of it. Now, as I was listening to the first interview with a lady named Catherine Zeta-Jones, a Welsh actress who played in plenty of American musicals and movies, something I found interesting is that, like many people, including myself, you know, she works out in the morning, but at the same time, unlike other people, maybe she watches the news at night, specifically to catch up on big events and big things that are happening. Because, and this is probably the most important part, she likes to exercise her body at dawn and her mind at dusk, basically. She also kind of just brings candles everywhere to make herself feel at home wherever she goes. I heard Christina Aguilera does this as well. The second interview is with an athlete named Kyle Menard. He originally came into the world with no arms or legs, but at some point he could type 50 to 60 words a minute because he taught himself how to type with his elbows and smash that like button because he had prosthetics. He wrote a book called No Excuses shortly after finishing high school, which landed him a spot on Oprah. That's life-changing. Completely. He thought his education really started after he finished school. I can really wholeheartedly say the same thing about myself. If you're watching this, chances are, you know, you and I are probably in the same boat. Like, half the people who tried to climb Mount Kilimanjaro don't make it. And it took Kyle a year and a half to prepare, but he did. A few interviews are under each chapter. There are like 5. Each chapter has like an introduction that's written by Daymond John. The first chapter, he really gives his own insight on longevity when millennials are kind of now just going 24/7 versus, you know, a long time ago when everyone didn't feel the need to be as connected all the time. And then he talks about never really like taking no for an answer, where I found an interesting statistic. I found a great statistic about how the average toddler hears the word no 104 times a day. The third interview is with Nelly Galan, who the author describes as the Tyler Perry of Latino programming. She worked her ass off as a child selling Avon products alone, just for her parents to be able to afford an education for her at a very expensive school, from which she was actually initially expelled shortly after entering. You know why? Because she was Latino. That was the principal's reasoning. She said,
"We don't like your kind."
So, you know what she did? Probably what a lot of people would do today. She went and fought against it. Eventually, the nuns were like, "You know what? Actually, this was a mistake. Okay? Can you please come back?" They actually, like, low-key loved her writing work, and this girl was only 15. Alright, honestly, my problem with the book is mainly the title, come to think of it. Because at some point in the beginning, Daymond John says that there are all these sayings, of course rise and grind was not one of them, where they're inspiring and everything, but you're only saying them over and over again every day, and you're not really taking action on them because there's not that much faith that you apply to them. It makes you wonder, if you really think about it, whether the words are beginning to sort of lose their meanings. And I don't even know if this book was a reinforcement of its own meaning. Maybe it is, but if that's the case, why isn't it called One More Rise, One More Grind? Or like Rise and Grind Redefined? It's just things like this, these really small things, that I think from a marketing perspective push people away from buying books like this. For chapter 3, he begins by talking about Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is personally my favorite book of all time. He says he reads it once a year. I hear about so many entrepreneurs reading this book once a year. I listen to it once a month. Because, I don't know, I feel like, again, 100 is...
It's not enough. It's gotta be 1,000.
The next interview is with the rapper Tyler, the Creator. The thing about Tyler is that he really creates. He doesn't care about, you know, the business side of things. If you ever hear his music, hopefully that makes sense. It's not business, it's just personal for him. I just have so much to say about the music industry. Lately, what I've been doing is book reviews more than anything. Most likely, you found this video through search. Congratulations. But again, if you don't know my channel, I didn't mention this before, I'm actually a fully self-produced rapper and singer. A lot of people who are seeing me on here for the first time may not guess that, but believe me when I say I do not look how I sound. In fact, all of the beats you hear in these videos are made entirely by me. So, I'm a one-man team, basically. I decided recently to stop making music, hoping to earn a living doing it, because music money isn't enough for me. I have a 20-minute long video. It's a rant about why that is, and I will link it in the description if you want to check it out. But I did relate to so much of what Tyler said about his childhood, about his love for music, but especially creating it. I mean, my love for music is really robotic. I'll put it that way. In the last several years, it's turned into a sort of on and off switch type of thing. Lola Alvarez is the 6th interview, and she believes more in the business of life than a life of business. Similar to kind of how Tyler treats it. A huge thing I took from Lola's story is how much times really have changed. For the mom, and there are so many moms like this nowadays, whose kids can't really seem to handle what is thrown at them every day during school. She would push and see even more of what she saw when she was younger herself. Like, her sons were being constantly picked on, and the teachers thought the sons were lazy. Like myself, they had ADHD. Apparently, one of them also had like dyslexia, and like there was actually a lot more than just ADHD, but that's the first one that I heard. And as much as I dislike using labels, when it comes to something like ADHD, there's a point with certain people where it's like there's no question that they have it. Like, they are naturally a walking, talking self-distraction, whether they like it or not. People have told me, "You seem like you X," or "Have you ever Y?" I feel like everybody gets questions like that, but ADHD never seems to come up, ever. At least as much as Red Bull or coffee. And I think that's probably because I never miss my morning Adderall dosage. But there's so much more to it than the medication. It's just lots and lots and lots of dedication and hard work, and, you know, rising and grinding, like this book is about. The teachers said to Lola,
"Miss Alvarez, you will have to just come to terms with the fact that your 2 sons are..."
Imagine hearing that from a teacher today. How times have changed. Lots of people have criticized the modern society of America for what it does not do. But Through my lens, we have what seems like now a society where potential for greatness is really seen by a much higher percentage of the population than before. And I think that's a great thing, if by chance it's for the most part true. And if so, I think its consequences are a topic for another video. But at the beginning of chapter 4, this stood out. Younger people are more connected to the idea of doing good. It used to be that the focus is what have you done for me? And now it's what have you done for the planet? This also stood out. It reminded me of myself. I like to think me and my viewers think alike, and if I didn't, I probably wouldn't talk about myself as much as I do. Why else would you have made it this far into the video? The average view on my channel lasts 2 minutes and 24 seconds. So much work has gone into keeping it that high. So you are not average. When you are passionate about your work, and it really feels like you're on a mission to change people's lives for the better, the grind comes easy. They aren't watching the clock or even worrying about how much they might get paid. All of that falls away, and the sole focus, the sole motivation becomes standing as a kind of lightning rod with new insights and strategies, taking in what they can as quick as they can and putting it back into the world. The next person is probably one of the first people who come to mind for many of his fans if they were pushed to come up with some sort of an example of this at the top of their head. Gary Vaynerchuk. I have 120 videos of myself talking about things I've learned and my reflections of them through application and study. My book reviews, these videos, I call them my titles. But the other ones, the 120 videos, the playlist, the giant vein of content, I like to call those my insights. If you like titles, you will love insights. I like insights way more than titles. But in the next year or so, I'm probably going to be making more insights, and included in those is a slew of brand analysis videos about many, individual, personal brands of, leading entrepreneurs, thought leaders, or whatever you want to call these people of the information age. He's gonna be one of them, because I have a lot to say about him. Him and someone else who's interviewed in the book. If you want to know who they are, just keep watching. There wasn't that much I learned from Gary's interview. I mean, there was a part about a plane crash. I haven't heard this before. And imagining your family dying every single morning when you wake up so you can fill your state with a sense of gratitude for what you have, because, they're still there. They didn't actually die. But for you to imagine, a life where, you just found out they did die, it really puts a sort of, perspective in you. And imagine doing that every morning. I mean, a lot of people would find it dark, but whatever it is, hey man, 1, it's different, and 2, it works for him. And I feel like those are the 2 things that all of these people who are interviewed in this book, especially the author himself, have in common. The next interview is with Brian Lee, who ghostwrote Good Time by Owl City and Carly Rae Jepsen, as well as Work From Home by Fifth Harmony. He also co-founded a couple companies too. What I liked about Brian's interview is the part about kind of writing out and scripting what you say during a pitch. Probably 90% of the negative comments on my videos are just about how many little cuts there are. The reason that there are so many little 2-second cuts is because I can't remember all of the shit that I write down. All of these videos are just completely scripted out. 95% of, at least, of what you see in this video is written down before I film it, by the word. And I've really worked on that a ton in the last year. But that's because, all of that is a really filtered version of who I am. Who I am in real time is nothing close to this organized and straightforward. But I found that even if you write it down and read it a few times, something, a sales pitch or whatever, it really is better than having absolutely no idea what to say. Because I guarantee, believe it or not, I say this from recent experience especially, that you will remember at least 1 or 2 things, at least the first time you try it out. Like digital marketer Jason Capital says, if you don't script, you don't care. The 8th interview is with Christina Guerrero. If you haven't heard of any of these people, that's okay. I hadn't heard of over half of them. Only one of them I actually actively studied. She wanted to start a company that sold a bar for dogs to eat, like a food on the go type of thing. She experimented with hundreds of ideas and concepts. Her husband, fortunately, was a food scientist. And what I found interesting, as Daymond John put it, is that she wasn't frustrated by the dilemmas, but rather she was fascinated by how many different opportunities there were. In the intro to the next chapter, the author really dives into a day in his life of work and how he manages so many little things at once. And something I want to add about this book is, I don't know if you've watched any of my other book reviews, but some books I review have these occasional, quotes or lyrics or what have you, and they really tend to accentuate the points that the authors are trying to make. What Daymond John uses in this book is statistics, which I fucking hate math so much, but I love those because I think they're an amazing way to grab people's attention on a really particular topic. The next interview is with Carlos Santana. He's very wise, he's very spiritual. I think it was interesting how his father taught him, his father was a violinist, and taught him to play slower, because that is how you really get through to people. It's not so much about technique, it's more about spirit, which is like the total opposite of my music, kind of, and that's cool. My music isn't even about technique. It's more about a proposition that there's no difference between spirit and technique. I like the next interview with Wendy Williams, and it was great to hear how she balanced everything day to day. It's amazing how these people have found, through so much trial and error of their own, the things that they appreciate most every day out of habit, which is crazy. You know how many people are super depressed every day because they don't have things like that, which by the way are free? I'm willing to bet that so much of those things have contributed to their success. The next interview is with Michael Perella, who used basically a blue ocean strategy to break down the barriers of the kickboxing industry by doing what Bruce Lee says is using what's useful. Digital marketing also kind of helped propel this e-commerce company that sells watches, founded by Jake Kassan and Kramer LaPlante. I'm pretty sure it's like a private label company. This is just based on all the things I remember from my drop shipping research a couple months ago. But it's where you source your own products to other manufacturers and they ship it. Those guys are interviewed next, and then Daymond John interviews Grant Cardone, who talked about plenty of things. He doesn't think much about food. It's like gasoline. He just puts it in the tank and goes. Then he writes down his goals, which are massive and unachievable in this life. One of them is to amass a $10 billion real estate portfolio. Another is to build an estate that can earn $200 million a year in the year 2065, long after he is dead. Another is to meet 70 million people in his lifetime. Daymond John talks about flow and stepping back in the intro of the next chapter to kind of really look at what matters most. But have you ever had that feeling that you've done something, that you're doing something and you lose track of time? You feel like you've lost yourself in this or that activity? That's what flow feels like, but for many of us, it doesn't even happen often. I just looked at the time. I started filming this at 6:45, and right now it's 7:29, and that's how I'm feeling right now. Only 1 in 5 people says that it happens to them several times a day. 15% of people say that it never happens at all to them. Lots of this book talks about sustained performance, but not so much the bigger picture. Honestly, to me, it's more the day-to-day things that lead up to the sustained performances. And a lot of people, they wake up and they drink a bunch of coffee, like yours truly. But at the end of the day, you talk to them, and it's like talking to a zombie. I think this book teaches us a lot of ways to really combat things like that and actually do something about them. The next interview is with a couple co-restaurateurs named Al and Brittany Baker. Brittany is Al's daughter, and how they kind of kept each other focused during the growth of Carl Jr.'s. And my main takeaway from that interview is that there really is nothing wrong with having a side hustle, at all. But especially if you can balance out your time to kind of scale it. That's where a lot of the magic kind of happens. And that's what I'm working on right now. Joel Osteen, the richest priest, or I think he's a priest, on the planet, is interviewed next. Now, I know where there are so many priests who do not fit this description, so no offense to any who do, but some priests seem to have this sort of holier-than-thou mentality. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. I don't spend a lot of time speaking to them, so I guess that's really kind of just what I heard. But if that's true, I really don't think it describes a guy like Joel Osteen. He seems like the type of person who really anybody would want in their life, and a great, humble role model. He has a very uplifting way of looking at things, yet a very laid-back way of looking at his day, despite how stressful it seems from the outside. So I was surprised because of how hard it seems like he works to handle all those different balls in the air. The outro is about maybe the objections a lot of people might have over this book in terms of implementing any sort of strategies that it lays out. And the epilogue is about Daymond John's experience with cancer and how he was able to tackle it with the help of his family, doctor, gratitude, and most importantly, himself. Quotes, "Why mess with a formula that works? Remember, these ultra-successful people get the same 1,440 minutes in every day as you do, and there's plenty you can learn for how they use them. Life is not what you accept, it's what you negotiate. One man's burden is another man's feather. No doesn't mean no. Sometimes it just means not yet. If you can't get your ass to work, get your assets to work. I am not what happened to me. It may be stupid, but it's my stupid. When you stop touching people, you lose touch. If I can't control my body, how am I going to control my business? How am I going to control my money? How am I going to control my customers? How am I going to control the rest of my day if I can't even control 158 pounds? The two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why." Direction 1. I recommend this book, or actually the author recommends this book, for two types of people. The first one is someone who's already waking up and working, so I guess anyone. But chances are, if that person really kind of does the same thing every day, but they find that same thing very interesting and they're kind of looking at ways to sharpen it, their routines or whatever else, that's the first person. I re-listened to that one part like 4 times and I couldn't find the part where he talks about the second person. But I honestly agree with him. If you have a daily routine and you do the same thing like every morning especially, and you want some more fresh perspectives on what to do or think of differently in order to maximize the jumpstart or even energy management part of your day, like how to make sure that you actually sustainably like get the most out of your energy, I think this book is an insightful read. And it also lets you know there are like-minded people out there. If you're in an environment every day where you feel like you're not appreciated enough, or you feel like some kind of like a oddball or outcast, but you still love getting the most out of your energy even though, you know, it feels like the environment sort of drains it out of you throughout the day, I am very sure this book will probably give you some interesting and unique tactics on how to get just a little bit more out of a situation like that. Direction 2. If you like this book, I really highly recommend High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard, because it really solidified how to organically sustain a high performance throughout a really long span of time over the long run. Like that and Flow by Michal. Okay, I'm working on pronouncing that last name. I don't recommend the book that often, but it is a great book. It's where the concept of flow kind of came from. Rise and Grind by Daymond John. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check out and read the reviews. There's a link to that and all the other books that I mentioned in this video as well. If there are any other books that you guys want me to review, please let me know in the comments below. But hey, make sure to leave a like if you like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. I don't know why someone would watch this far into the video, and or any of my other videos and not subscribe. Given the thing I said about audience retention is what YouTube calls it earlier. But if you could also turn on the little bell to receive a notification every time I drop a new video, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.